There is a moment in every human life when the world feels silent, not cruel, not kind, just silent. It happens when you attend a funeral and realize you're supposed to feel something you don't. When you smile at a party while feeling completely alone. When you follow rules you never agreed to, for reasons no one can explain. That moment, that crack in the performance we call normal life, is where Albert Camus begins. He built an entire philosophy on that silence. And in The Stranger, he gave it a human face, a man named Meursault, a man who does not cry at his mother's funeral, a man who feels the sun more than he feels guilt, a man who kills without hatred, a man who discovers, too late, that society fears nothing more than a person who refuses to pretend. But here's what most people miss about this novel. It isn't about a sociopath. It isn't about moral decay. It's about what happens when one ordinary man stops performing the script society handed him. And what that man discovers is that the script was always a lie. This is the story of the most misunderstood novel of the 20th century. A novel that isn't about murder, isn't about morality. It's about the terrifying freedom that appears when the world no longer gives you meaning. Let us step into the mind of the ultimate outsider and see what Camus wanted us to learn from The Stranger. Meursault is not a monster. He is something far more dangerous to society. A man who sees reality without filters. Let's be clear about what this means. Meursault doesn't lack emotion. He experiences joy swimming in the sea, pleasure with his girlfriend Marie, affection for his neighbor's dog. He feels the texture of life intensely, but he feels it honestly, without exaggeration. Where others wear masks, he doesn't bother. Where others cry because they're expected to, he simply refuses to lie. When his mother dies, the first line of the novel is stark. Maman died today. Or yesterday, maybe. I don't know. Critics have called this callous, but Camus is showing us something else. Meursault doesn't wrap his mother's death in poetry because grief doesn't work on society's schedule. He doesn't know what day she died because bureaucracy delayed the telegram. He tells you the truth of his confusion, rather than performing certainty. At the funeral, he notices the heat, the glare, the screws in the coffin catching light, the physical reality of the moment. He doesn't weep, not because he doesn't care, but because authentic grief doesn't arrive on command. But here's what society cannot forgive. They don't want truth. They want theater. The funeral director expected tears. The mourners expected him to look at his mother's body. Society expected a performance of suffering. And Meursault, quietly, almost accidentally, exposes the dark truth beneath our social rituals. Most of what we call proper behavior is just agreed upon lying. We cry when we're supposed to. We say we're fine when we're not. We perform enthusiasm for jobs that drain us. We celebrate holidays whose meanings we've forgotten. Meursault commits the ultimate crime in a world of pretenders. He refuses to fake it. And the moment he does, every person around him becomes complicit in the lie. They see their own performance reflected back, and they hate him for it. Meursault doesn't refuse the world refuses him. Why did Meursault pull the trigger? This is one of the most misinterpreted moments in literature, and understanding it changes everything. He didn't kill the Arab out of hatred. He didn't plan it. There is no ideology behind it, no revenge plot, no malice. Instead, Camus writes the murder like an accident of nature. Let me read you what Meursault says. The sun weighs on him. The light reflects off a blade. Everything becomes unbearable. His head pounds. The heat crushes down, and then... It was then that everything began to reel. The sea carried up a thick, fiery breath. The sky seemed to be splitting from end to end to rain down fire. My whole being tensed, and I squeezed my hand around the revolver. The trigger gave. Notice what's missing from this description. Intent. Motive. Meaning. Camus is telling us something terrifying about human nature. We don't always act from reason. We act from pressure, exhaustion, impulse, from the absurd chaos of the world itself. When Meursault says, "It was because of the sun," he is not being poetic or evasive. He is being brutally, unbearably honest. He pulled the trigger because in that moment, overwhelmed by physical sensation, he became pure reaction. No philosophy, no moral calculation, just a body under pressure that released. But society cannot accept this explanation, because if Meursault is telling the truth, then human action is not controlled by rational will. Justice cannot be rationally administered. Morality is not a stable system. Free will itself becomes questionable, and we, all of us, are far less in control than we desperately need to believe. So society does what it always does when faced with uncomfortable truth. It creates a story it can understand, a villain it can punish, a meaning it can enforce. Even if that meaning is completely false, the trial is not about murder. Read the novel carefully and you'll see. The prosecutor barely discusses the killing itself. Instead, he obsesses over the funeral. Meursault's dry eyes, his calm demeanor, the fact that he drank coffee, that he smoked a cigarette, that he couldn't remember details about his mother's age. One of the most chilling lines in the novel comes from the prosecutor. He accuses Meursault of burying his mother with crime in his heart. Think about what this means. The prosecutor is arguing that a man is guilty of murder because he didn't cry at a funeral that happened before the murder. This isn't justice. This is ritual enforcement. Camus wants you to understand something profound. Society doesn't punish the guilty. It punishes the different. Meursault scares them, not because he is evil, but because he is authentic in a world that runs on performance. He didn't mourn correctly. He didn't show remorse correctly. He doesn't speak the language of shared moral theater. And this, not the bullet, is what they cannot forgive. There's a moment in the trial where Meursault almost laughs because he realizes the entire proceeding is about a man who doesn't exist. They're not trying him. They're trying a symbol, a story, a monster they've constructed to protect their worldview. The prosecutor calls him morally guilty of his mother's death. Not legally, morally. He's being executed not for what he did, but for who he is, a man who refuses to lie about his inner life to make others comfortable. In a world built on illusions, the truth is a death sentence. And here's what makes this terrifying. How many of us perform emotions we don't feel to avoid this same judgment? How many times have you pretended enthusiasm, faked certainty, smiled through misery because someone expected it? Meursault holds up a mirror to our entire civilization, and we can't stand what we see. In prison, Meursault becomes free for the first time, not physically, but philosophically. He loses everything, his freedom, his future, his life. And in that loss, he discovers what Camus calls the absurd. Let me explain what this means, because it's the heart of everything. The absurd is the collision between two truths. 1. We crave meaning, purpose, justice, explanation. We want life to make sense. We want our actions to matter. We want the universe to care. 2. The universe is completely indifferent. It offers no meaning, no purpose, no cosmic justice, just existence, raw, unexplained, and utterly neutral. Life has no script written in the stars, no grand narrative arc, no divine author guiding your story. The universe doesn't care if you cry at a funeral. It doesn't care if you're good or bad. It doesn't care if you live or die. It doesn't care if you suffer or rejoice. And once Meursault accepts this, fully, deeply accepts it, something extraordinary happens. He becomes untouchable. There is a moment near the end where a chaplain visits him in prison, trying to offer him God, salvation, meaning, and Meursault explodes in rage. Not because he hates religion, but because he finally understands that the chaplain is offering him the same lie society always offered, a story to make death comfortable, a narrative to avoid the truth. After the chaplain leaves, Meursault has his revelation. I opened myself to the gentle indifference of the world. Read that line again, gentle indifference. This is not nihilism. This is not despair. This is liberation. When you stop demanding that the universe give you meaning, when you stop waiting for God or fate or justice to explain your life, when you accept that existence simply is, without why or wherefore, you become free to create your own meaning. You become free to live honestly. You become free to experience life as it actually is, not as some script tells you it should be. The prison walls are still there. Death is still coming. Nothing external has changed, but internally, Meursault is finally completely alive. Facing execution, Meursault discovers a truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. When the fear of death disappears, life becomes infinitely precious. Think about how most of us live. We postpone joy until we achieve something. We delay authenticity until it's convenient. We spend our lives chasing future meaning while missing present experience. We live as if death isn't coming. Meursault, with days or hours left, does the opposite. He stops looking for cosmic justice. He stops hoping for something more. He stops pretending, and suddenly, finally, he feels completely alive. He remembers his mother and for the first time understands her. At the end of her life in the nursing home, she took a fiancé. She started again. She said yes to life even at the edge of death. Everyone thought she was foolish. Why bother? Now Meursault understands. Because life is all there is, so you embrace it fully, absurdly, joyfully, even when it makes no sense. He embraces the chaos, the beauty, the randomness, the magnificent pointlessness of it all. And in the final lines of the novel, he wishes for a crowd at his execution, not out of cruelty, but because he wants the world to witness something rare. A man who lived without pretending. A man who accepted the absurd. A man who chose truth over comfort. A man who died exactly as he lived, unmasked. This is Camus' ultimate message. The rebel isn't the one who burns down society. The rebel is the one who refuses to lie about their inner experience. Why does Meursault still disturb us? Why is The Stranger still controversial, still banned in some places, still debated? Because Camus forces us to confront ourselves without mercy. He strips away every comfortable illusion that the universe cares, that suffering has meaning, that death can be defeated, that our performances of emotion make us good people. Meursault is not a hero, he is not a villain, he is a mirror, and in that mirror we see something we spend our whole lives avoiding. The terrifying freedom that comes when you realize no one is writing your story but you. Society gives you a script, religion gives you a script, culture gives you a script, but none of them are true. They're just useful fictions to make existence bearable. And Meursault asks us the question society fears most. What remains of you when all expectations, rules, and illusions disappear? Do you become free? Or do you collapse? Do you create your own meaning? Or do you beg for someone else to provide it? Camus believed something extraordinary, something that makes him one of the most life-affirming philosophers who ever lived. If you accept the absurd, if you stop running from the world's indifference, you don't fall into despair. You rise above it. Because when you accept that life has no inherent meaning, you discover something profound. You get to create the meaning. Every moment becomes yours. Every choice becomes authentic. Every experience becomes vivid. You stop performing for an imaginary audience. You stop living according to someone else's values. You stop waiting for permission to be yourself. And maybe, like Meursault under the burning sun, like Camus smoking cigarettes in a Paris cafe, writing about the absurd while Nazi boots marched outside, like anyone who has ever stopped pretending and started living, you finally become alive in a world that never promised you anything. That's not despair. That's the most radical form of hope there is. The world doesn't care about you, and that, paradoxically, impossibly, beautifully, sets you free. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart.